Here's one that always gets me. Stories of giants.
I want that to be real so bad. I mean, I want all of this
That the
to be real.
Smithsonian's been hiding the information. Those are the big conspiracies.
Could be.
Down in their basement, they've got like a 10-foot tall human being. A race of giants that existed. Roamed the earth.
Yeah.
David and Goliath's a real story.
It just seems like they wouldn't be gone. They wouldn't be the ones that would have been killed off.
Unless, in the cataclysm, like the Younger Dryas impact theory, there wasn't enough food. And they died off, you know? Because if you're that big, you need to eat a lot.
The idea of giants isn't just campfire storytelling or ancient mythology. It's woven into the historical record of nearly every civilization on Earth. And the Smithsonian conspiracy? That's where things get interesting. For over a century, researchers and amateur archaeologists have accused the Smithsonian Institution of suppressing evidence of giant humanoid remains discovered across North America. Between the 1880s and 1920s, newspapers from Wisconsin to Nevada reported the discovery of massive skeletons, some measuring 7, 8, even 10 feet tall, often buried in elaborate mounds alongside copper weapons and ceremonial artifacts. The Smithsonian collected many of these remains. Then, according to the conspiracy, they vanished. Critics claim the institution deliberately destroyed or hid the bones to protect the established narrative of human evolution. The Smithsonian denies this, stating that many reports were exaggerated or misidentified animal bones. But the lack of transparency has fueled the fire for generations. Now, let's talk about caloric reality. If a race of giants, say 9 to 12 feet tall, actually existed, they would need an extraordinary amount of food to survive. A human standing 10 feet tall would require anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 calories per day just to maintain basic metabolic function. That's quadruple what an average person needs. During periods of climate upheaval, like the Younger Dryas, roughly 12,800 years ago, global temperatures plummeted. Megafauna went extinct. Food became scarce. If giants existed during this time, their size would have been a fatal disadvantage. They would have starved first, wiped out by the very biology that made them dominant. But here's the question that haunts anthropology. What if they didn't die out then? What if some survived much longer than we think?
So you think they were around like way long ago?
Way
died
long
off
ago.
way longer.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think like recently. But I think like it is, there's so many stories and so many cultures have these stories, even in the Bible, of a race of giants.
Yeah.
Like it seems like it couldn't just be big people.
Right.
It seems like what they're talking about is something crazy.
Let's go to the source. The Bible doesn't just mention giants, it names them, with specificity, with genealogies. The most famous are the Nephilim, first mentioned in Genesis 6:4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Hebrew word itself, Nephilim, is derived from naphal, meaning to fall. Some scholars interpret this as the fallen ones. Others argue it means those who cause others to fall. Warriors so terrifying they made enemies collapse in fear. The Nephilim reappear in Numbers 13:33, when Israelite spies scout the promised land and report back in terror. We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them.
I guess it could be if you're just because if you're just mythologizing. There's no way that's a word, but if you're just turning something that is real, this is the same with like a dragon. People obviously just get inspired by things that are around them. They start to morph into things. I mean, there was no fire-breathing animal flying around.
Probably crocodiles and shit like that.
Yeah, crocodiles, and then there are like cobras that spit venom, which obviously gets in your eyes. Probably gonna burn like a son of a bitch. So like, there's like the fire myth. I mean.
And people exaggerate.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So like, people will take somebody who is a big son of a bitch, and they go, "Oh, well, let's exaggerate and say that the guy he fought was 9 feet tall instead of 6'5".
Exactly.
Which he probably was.
Yeah.
Exaggeration is real. Myth-making is real. Human beings are storytellers, and stories grow in the telling. But here's the problem with dismissing the giant accounts as pure exaggeration. The details are too consistent. The descriptions span continents, centuries, and cultures that had zero contact with one another. Native American tribes spoke of the Saite-Ka, red-haired giants in Nevada. The Paiute people have oral histories of hunting them to extinction in caves. The ancient Greeks wrote of the Gigantes. The Norse had the Jotnar. All of these accounts describe similar beings, humanoid, bipedal, extraordinarily tall, often violent, and frequently living in isolated regions, mountains, caves, islands. Now let's talk about David and Goliath. The biblical text gives us Goliath's height, 6 cubits and a span. That's somewhere between 9 feet 6 inches and 10 feet 2 inches. He wore bronze armor weighing 125 pounds. His spear's iron point alone weighed 15 pounds. The text describes him as a champion warrior from Gath, a Philistine city once inhabited by the Anakim. Goliath wasn't a freak of nature. He came from a lineage of giants. 2 Samuel 21 describes 4 other giants from Gath, all brothers or relatives of Goliath, each killed in battle by David's warriors. The fact that the Bible records this specific detail suggests these weren't mythological monsters. These were real people with documented physical anomalies.
But also, when you talk about races of these giants, you could also be talking about like people from Iceland, right?
Who
like,
were naturally
enormous
big as hell.
Viking dudes.
Yeah.
Who were always win those fucking strongman competitions. You know, those guys there's giants up there. Like 400, like the Mountain from Game of Thrones, like that kind of person. So you think about that, like that's that size human.
Right.
There could have been a bunch of those around, and maybe that's what they were talking about, giants. Or there could have been like a specific race of humans. Like they keep finding these additional types of humans. Like they found Denisovans fairly recently, and then that other one that we brought up the other day, the big-headed people. That's fairly recently. They've discovered that this is a completely different branch.
Hafthor Bjornsson, the Mountain from Game of Thrones, is 6'9" and weighs over 400 pounds. A man like that encountered in the Bronze Age, he'd be remembered as a giant. But then we get into the really interesting stuff, extinct human species. Then there's Homo longi, the dragon man, discovered in China in 2021. This skull is massive, brain case larger than modern humans. It represents a previously unknown human lineage that may have survived until as recently as 146,000 years ago.
That there may, but here's the thing, if they did find those, would they tell us? Like if archaeologists, like who would put the cap on that? If they found like a 10-foot human under like a just gigantic dead human with a huge sword underground, like would they just say we're wrong, giants existed? Or would they go, people can't handle this?
That's a tough, because that's the answer to, or that's the question for so many things.
They might say people can't handle it. It's not outside the realm of possibility.
I would say, they probably say.
Isn't that infuriating?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if it was you? Now imagine you're out in West Texas, wherever you are, hanging out with your friends, and somebody notices something in the ground, and you start digging, and you pull out a fucking thigh bone that's this big, and you plop it down, and you go, what the fuck is that?
Let's talk about what happens when you actually do find something like that. Because it's happened multiple times. And the response is never what you'd expect. In 2002, a squad of US Special Forces soldiers was on a mission in the Kandahar province of Afghanistan. They were investigating a remote cave system after reports of missing military personnel in the area. What they found inside would become one of the most controversial stories in modern military history. The soldiers encountered a creature standing between 12 and 15 feet tall. It had red hair, 6 fingers on each hand, and 6 toes on each foot. It wore primitive clothing and wielded a massive spear. The being killed one soldier and injured several others before being shot and killed with sustained automatic weapons fire. The body was allegedly airlifted out by helicopter. The surviving soldiers were debriefed and ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements. Official military records deny the incident ever occurred. But here's what makes the story compelling. The description matches historical accounts of giants in the region. Ancient Persian texts describe the Div, red-haired giants who lived in mountain caves. So Cody's question is the right one. Who decides what the public can handle? Because if the scientific establishment accepted the existence of a recent human-sized species we hadn't documented, especially one that might challenge evolutionary timelines or religious narratives, the implications would be staggering. Entire academic careers are built on consensus. Reputations hinge on peer review, and the peer review system is conservative by design. If you're a young archaeologist and you find something that doesn't fit the model, you bury it, literally and figuratively. Or you lose your funding, your tenure, and your credibility. That's not conspiracy. That's institutional inertia.
And then you got a buddy who works at the university nearby, and he starts digging. He's like, hey, dude, this is a fucking human foot. And he pulls out a human foot that's size 38. And you're like, what is going on, man? And so then you bring in some experts, and like, holy shit, dude, this is a giant. And then they do DNA tests. They find out it's a real actual creature.
Yeah. I'm I'm telling everyone.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you. The scientists will kill you. They're going to run you off the road.
Yeah, I guess.
Look at
The longest, or what I guess would be the tallest
The people have ever found?
that they've ever found. It was found in China. It's supposedly about 4,400 years old. Would have been about 16, 18 years old. The weird thing here is, though, that it says there was 3 drill holes found in the skull, and they don't know why.
Whoa, drill holes. How big was it?
6'4".
Oh.
6'4". In Neolithic China, that was a giant. The skeleton Joe's referencing comes from the Jiaojia site in Shandong province, dated to around 2400 BCE. The average male height in that region during that period was approximately 5 feet 3. This individual would have towered over his contemporaries by more than a foot, the equivalent of a 7-foot tall person today. But those drill holes? That's where it gets weird. Trepanation, the practice of drilling or scraping holes into the human skull, is one of the oldest surgical procedures in history. It's been found in skulls from Peru, France, Russia, and China, dating back over 10,000 years. Some holes show signs of healing, meaning the person survived. Others do not. Why would ancient people do this? Theories include relieving intracranial pressure from head injuries, treating migraines, epilepsy, or mental illness, spiritual or religious rituals, creating an opening for demons to escape, or for divine visions to enter. But 3 holes in a giant? That suggests something deliberate, repeated, possibly unsuccessful. Was this a medical procedure that went wrong? Were they trying to cure him of something related to his size? Or was this a ritual sacrifice, a punishment, or an attempt to extract something from his skull after death? We don't know. The bones don't talk, but they leave questions that archaeology can't answer. And here's something most people don't realize. Ancient China has dozens of giant skeleton discoveries. The Jiaojia site alone uncovered 205 graves, many containing individuals over 6 feet tall. Genetic analysis suggests they were a distinct subpopulation with unique physical traits, taller, longer-limbed, and more robust than surrounding groups. They disappeared from the archaeological record around 2000 BCE. No one knows why.
Well, back then, that was probably fucking huge.
Well, you said they found it in China?
Yeah.
That's a giant.
And they're calling it, they call
Right.
it
Well, it
giant.
might be Mongolian, you know?
Well,
Also
just
looked
compared
up-
to the Chinese that are found,
Right.
they're probably like, holy shit, this
Goliath
thing's-
is anywhere from modern day, maybe they say up to 6'6", but like taking the word for word from the Bible, it would have been about 9'9".
Yeah, that's what I always
Right,
thought. That's
right,
what I always
right,
I don't know
right.
how to
remember
see
as
a
a kid.
weight size.
Right. Well, if you're back then, nobody had any food, and the average man was probably like 5'4". So if you encounter some dude who's 6'6", some big jack guy, that is a giant.
That's a giant.
In Bronze Age Canaan, the average male stood between 5 feet 2 and 5 feet 5. Malnutrition, disease, and constant warfare kept people small. So when the Israelite spies saw the Anakim and said they felt like grasshoppers, that wasn't poetic exaggeration. That was legitimate terror. A 6'6" warrior in that context would be a statistical anomaly, a freak of nature, someone whose size alone would grant them legendary status. But the Bible doesn't say Goliath was 6'6". The Masoretic text, the Hebrew version, says he was 6 cubits and a span. That puts Goliath at approximately 9 feet 9 inches tall. However, earlier Greek translations, the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls, list him at 4 cubits and a span, which would make him around 6'9". Still enormous for the time, but not mythologically so. Which version is correct? Scholars argue both ways. Some believe scribes exaggerated the number over centuries of oral tradition. Others argue the Greek texts were corrected to make the story more believable. And when David killed Goliath with the sling stone to the forehead, he wasn't just winning a battle. He was participating in a genocide that had been going on for centuries.
And then also, like, you got to think, human beings, if they exist today and they're 6'6", they had the potential to be that big back then. They just didn't get the food.
Yeah.
But if you are in some very nutrient-rich environment, look at
Yao Ming
and
both those guys play pro basketball.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Muggsy, is it Muggsy Bogues?
Muggsy Bogues, yeah.
But there's smaller people that exist that can function and do stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But what's crazy is that the potential for that guy, the Yao guy, who's, how tall is he? Right,
Yeah,
that exists
yeah.
in the human genome, right? That's not like we engineered them like we did dogs.
Right.
Like that exists.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe back then, if you had a ton of food and you didn't have to worry about war, like, and people
Yeah.
just kept breeding and growing and getting nutrient rich, because the thing about people in the past was they didn't get any fucking food, man.
Yeah.
Human potential is constrained by environment, not genetics. Yao Ming is 7'6". Robert Wadlow, the tallest confirmed human in history, reached 8 feet 11 inches before dying at age 22 from complications related to his height. These people weren't genetically engineered. They're natural expressions of human genetic variation, rare but real. If those genes exist now, they existed then.
Like the average size of a guy who fought in the Civil War was, I think, 125 pounds or something crazy like that.
5'4" and 120, I think, is
nuts.
The thing. Yeah,
starving to death.
It's like
starving to death, shooting people with muskets.
Like a 14-year-old girl. I mean, that's
nuts.
like, yeah,
right. And all they needed was food. You know, you give them protein, and then they grow normal sized, which is really wild.
Yeah, because there's tons of people that are well over 7 feet. It's not like it's. I mean, it is an anomaly compared to.
Speaking of, there's one guy in the Civil War 7'6". He would have stood out real bit, but everybody else was 5'8", average.
He was
5'8".
7'6" in the Civil War. Holy shit!
His name was Captain David Van Buskirk, served in the 27th Indiana Infantry Regiment during the Civil War. He stood 7 feet 6 inches tall and weighed around 380 pounds. He was captured by Confederate forces in 1862 and held as a prisoner of war. According to accounts, his captors were so astonished by his size that they briefly put him on display before exchanging him.
The thing about the stories in the Bible, though, it's like these are like mystical giants, the Nephilim, you know?
The Nephilim weren't just tall, they were half divine, born of the sons of God and human women. The text doesn't tell us what that means, but it tells us they were different. In ancient Jewish and Christian tradition, the Nephilim were considered abominations, corruptions of the natural order. Their existence was one of the reasons God sent the flood, to wipe the slate clean, to destroy the hybrid beings that should never have been. But the Nephilim returned after the flood. Numbers 13 makes that clear. The spies saw them. And that's why the conquest of Canaan wasn't just about land. It was about cleansing, about erasing the last remnants of a corrupted race. Joshua and Caleb didn't just defeat armies. They exterminated entire populations, city by city, tribe by tribe. By the time David faces Goliath, the giants are nearly extinct. Gath is one of their last refuges. And when David's warriors kill the 4 remaining giants in 2 Samuel 21, the text ends with a chilling line. These 4 were descendants of Rapha in Gath, and they fell at the hands of David and his men. That's it. The end of the giants. The end of a bloodline that stretched back to the Nephilim. The end of a people who were so feared, so different, that entire civilizations dedicated themselves to their extermination. But here's what haunts the story. What if they weren't myths? What if they were just people? People who were taller, yes. Stronger, yes. But still human, still mortal, still capable of being afraid. Imagine being the last giant, knowing your people are gone, knowing every army in the region has been sent to hunt you down, knowing that your size, the one thing that made you powerful, is now the thing that makes you a target. Goliath didn't volunteer to fight David. He was sent. The Philistine army put him forward because they knew the Israelites feared giants. He walked onto that battlefield carrying the weight of his people's extinction on his shoulders. And a shepherd boy with a sling ended it all. No divine intervention, no mystical power, just a stone, a skull, and gravity. The stories are real. The bones exist, at least some of them. Maybe the truth about giants isn't that they were mythological. Maybe it's that they were too real, too human, too much like us. Because if giants existed, if they were wiped out, if they were hunted to extinction by our ancestors, then we have to confront an uncomfortable reality. We killed them because they were different, and difference in the ancient world was dangerous. They were people who lost a war, and history is written by the victors. So the next time you hear a story about giants, ask yourself, who's telling it? And who did they erase to make sure their version survived? Because the giants can't tell their side anymore. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.